had a lot of difficulty titling library music because it has to be sort of functional and hopefully a little bit different and inspired. But I've not normally had much trouble with album track titles, album titles. Yeah, big. But I didn't have a lot this time, funnily enough. One track which seemed to had kind of slightly melancholy, but not terribly sad. That was the sort of rainy day postcards. I think the images on the tracks were nebulous to me, most of them. There were very few where I definitely had a title. In fact, I mean, I had help with the track titles as well, which doesn't normally happen. Both James and John Dan, who runs my website, came up with a couple actually. There were sort of short lists, and John pitched in with a few things. Sometimes what happens is you have a burst of inspiration, or what you think is inspiration, and you think, yeah, that'll work really well, and then the following day you think, no, it's actually rubbish. Actually, how could you have thought that? The one called Castle Ruins, for instance, to me that had a slightly Iberian quality, slightly medieval, and so I was trying to find a title that got all that in, you know. So I was looking for names of castle ruins in Spain, and I came up with some quite florid titles. Amongst the various titles I put forward, I had Castle Ruins, and everyone just went for Castle Ruins. I thought, well, that was a glorious waste of time, wasn't it? Yeah, so all the Ponzi ones went out. But I mean, it's tricky. Titling is tricky, actually. It's really best if it comes straight away. I often think if it comes straight away, or it's a fug, actually. Well, I remember in Genesis I suppose it was original, but I certainly remember coming up with this idea of just rubbing my finger, doing it like a sort of tremolando. You have to be very relaxed. If you start getting tense, your finger starts doing this, and you get those sounds, scrunch. And put that through a reverb, and obviously it has this quality. So what I didn't want this to be was a kind of austere thing where, you know, it's guitar, therefore you can't have any effects. Why not? I mean, you know, make it sound as, just enhance each track with effects that are, well, hopefully natural, homogeneous, nothing too tricksy. The one track that was tricky was the bizarre one called Mouse Trip, which is rather quirky. Now there we did play around with some quite quirky effects because it was slightly quirky track, and therefore it seemed real. But the others, James was brilliant with using, you know, because it's been done in surround sound as well, so we'd have sort of shorter reverb, longer reverb, and then the ones where you'd sort of push it out into space a bit more, and just really try and enhance each track so that some were absolutely here, you know, like and others just taking it out into space. So I think that kind of spatial quality, spatial difference and contrast, hopefully, as well as the different timbre of the instruments as well, actually does make it a more varied listen. I could listen to the best guitarist in the world play Bach lute suites, and after about the third or fourth one, you know, the music is wonderful, the playing is wonderful, but your ear is just getting rather used to that timbre, and I personally find my attention slightly wandering sometimes. I mean, some of the Private Parts and Pieces albums have been originally written, but the majority were an excuse just to use the sort of best of, and then piece them together and try and make a kind of homogeneous flow, some with more success than the others. So here you're on a completely different approach, which is music specially written for, that's obviously going to take longer. I mean, I've started doing less library music recently. Well, in fact, I did a whole lot in 2015, and James, my engineer and co-writer now, he took a lot of these embryonic ideas away and kind of developed them, and we pushed them out through lots of different libraries, different sources, different styles. But that gave me the time, because he was doing that, and then there was the selling process, and to actually work on this. Often coming up with what might be a verse, might be a chorus, and you're right, there is that middle area where, is this a song or is it an instrumental? You know, tricky sometimes actually. But I do still write songs, but I don't often have that kind of white heat of inspiration where you do the whole song and the lyrics. You know, it probably the best thing is to have your heart broken for that, or to be really angry about something. I mean, it's just speaking from personal experience. I mean, some people, you know, the school songwriters write all the time, but I'm more of an instrumental writer. So, yeah, it is difficult. And I mean, most of my songwriting in the last, in many years has always been in collaboration with somebody else. You know, where I tend to start ideas. You tend to get starters and finishers. Some people love taking existing stuff and doing things on top. That's their métier. Yeah, I'm a starter and a bad finisher with songs. It's going to sound incredibly Sudi, this, and this is yawn time, but I was with my friend Kike and his girlfriend in Rome, and we went to the Sistine Chapel, where normally people will be looking at the Sistine Chapel and not scrabbling something down on it. It literally was the back of a bus ticket, virtually, you know, the old cliche. I just got this tune came into my head, and lyrics started coming in, and so I was sort of, yes, that's fantastic, isn't it? And I was trying to get this stuff down, but that's rare. But that happened more often then. But I think over the years, as I've become dragooned, if you like, into more of a instrumental writer, it happens less. I mean, I did write a lot of songs in the 80s, in the post-punk era, where, you know, what we now call prog, all the prog bands were sort of sent fleeing into the priest holes, or into the desert, and we were all trying to make a living somehow if you weren't super established. And even then, you know, the super established ones were getting terrible flack. So if you look at Genesis, I don't think any of us were. I mean, the others have obviously, you know, as the group and individually had big hits, but you would never say the constituent members were people that wrote songs that were incredibly coverable. You know, there's not been that many. Probably Phil Collins more than the others with Against All Odds and stuff. But actually, whereas if you take somebody, it's an odd one really, because Dylan's style is kind of weird and quite odd, but massive amount of covers to his music. Now, what's he got that? Maybe our stuff was always a bit poncy, a bit, you know, arty-farty. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but it just not something that somebody else felt very comfortable doing. It was too much of a signature to it, too personal. I don't know really. And then, you know, you try and, in inverted commas, be commercial, and that's fatal, because the person that's commercial, as Mike Rutherford said once, you know, the best ones are the ones you're just doing it naturally. You know, if it just comes out naturally. If you literally sit down, I must write a commercial song, it often sounds really trite and mannered and just rubbish. So there was quite a lot of that. I mean, I was a little bit unlucky actually, because I wrote a song called Golden Bodies, which Chris Neal definitely had masterminded for Sheena Easton. And Sheena Easton was big in the early 80s, but then he lost Sheena Easton, so it was done by a smaller group. Then there was another one, Distant Heart, which I did with Roy Hill, which was a kind of country song, sort of 12-string country, quite sweet actually. Roger Daltrey was going to do that, maybe even did it. You know, the charts were sent down to the studio, but the album was canned. So I kind of, this isn't a hard luck story, but after a while I began to think, but this doesn't seem to be, somebody somewhere doesn't want this to happen. So I had a cover by Bucks Fizz, which was actually quite decent actually. But then it was going to be their third single, but they then had that awful coach crash. So things in terms of the song area were kind of not, you know, a bit doomed really. So coming back where we came in, I've sort of, I suppose, fallen out of the way of songs really. But you never stop. You know, there's always that moment where you think, oh, that, you know, that could be. But I don't have many of those Sistine Chapel moments really, and I need somebody else. So if there's anybody out there that wants to help, come and help. There is a huge compartmentalizing going on, isn't there? I mean, everything is put into certain slots, and everything's so specialised now with the different forms of media. I think you have to. If you try and straddle areas, it's quite tricky, really. I've often said I think I'm more sort of filmic, light, classical, maybe more than prog, as in the sense of you know, sort of heavy riffs, and then suddenly a quiet bit with the flute, and then dashing off into a level and eight, going into. I'm not that sort of that kind of dramatic style of, but you know, broadly speaking, in the broad spectrum of things, I'm sure I qualify into sort of light prog, if you like. And you're right, leap prog. But there has been a renaissance, and bands like Big Big Train and many others. It's difficult to know how to define it, really. I mean, I would tend to like to think it's music that is more adventurous in form than your average basic song format. That doesn't mean to say it's better for it in any way at all. It's just music that's experimenting. You know, if you equate it with established forms in classical music, you know, you've got your longer forms, you've got your shorter forms, and you know, why shouldn't you experiment with longer forms? I mean, in very early Genesis days, when we signed with Jonathan King, we were doing 5-minute epics then with lots of different sections. And I remember there was a couple of songs that came out that did have a lot of sections. MacArthur's Park was by no means verse chorus. You know, you've got all that stuff, it settles down in the middle to like a whole different section, then it comes out via an instrumental section. So if you like, you could look at Day in the Life as well as a piece with many different sections. So you could argue in terms of prog format, getting away from verse chorus middle eight, that actually those pieces were a sort of precursor, if you like, for the prog bands flying off. The danger is when you fly off in different directions, does the thing make sense at the end? You know, it's like form. And people would always, when I then studied classical music, people would emphasize form so much. And I got very bored with some of this because I was already playing, and some of the classical forms I did find a bit tedious. But I could see it made sense afterwards, because what it was doing was actually just providing a discipline to stop you going doolally and adding endless sections with a bit of sellotape, which people are thinking, where's this guy gone? And you know, just keeping you in check. So I wouldn't be completely comfortable with doing the kind of heavier prog where you do. I think that's not me now, where you race around through loads and loads of different sections. To me, it can sound, I'll probably criticise it, that can sound a bit melodramatic and a bit histrionic to me. Now, it depends in whose hands it is and who does it and how you do it, obviously. But I think there is a danger. But yeah, I mean, broadly speaking, there is no category of light classical filmic. So I'm definitely light prog. I'm leap prog.